All right, our guest today is a tech entrepreneur joining us from across the pond in England, where he is growing a quite interesting legal tech startup that, put simply, and hopefully I don't butcher this, the company makes it easy for non-lawyers to create contracts and track the data that they contain. More to come on that. While the company has had its share of success, which we'll get to, he, like all founders on the dirt, is here to share a few stories of life in the trenches, not just the yellow brick road. So, founder and CEO of Legislate, Charles Brecque, welcome to the dirt.
Thank you, Jim, for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So, welcome to the show, first of all, but also just to get us started here, can you just share a little bit about what you do and how you got here?
Yeah, so I'm not a lawyer and I'm not pretending to be a lawyer. I have a background in engineering and worked at a machine learning spin out from the University of Oxford straight out of uni. And whilst I started in data science, I quickly moved to business development because I realized I wasn't the best data scientist, but I knew enough to be able to talk about it to clients. And whilst I was doing business development, I found that getting clients wasn't necessarily the hard part. It was actually closing the contracts. And the reason why, it was painfully long, and, many people who listen to the show have probably created contracts and have experienced some form of friction with contracts. It was essentially because we were waiting for our legal teams, the client's legal teams, to review, make amendments. And these were really simple contracts, NDAs or low value, software agreements or low value POC agreements. And in multiple occasions, we were losing contracts post legal negotiation because throughout that process, buyers would get promoted, buyers would lose budget, or simply buyers would lose interest. And it was really painful to invest so much time in deals that would eventually collapse because of legal. And I wanted to solve that with Legislate. So started Legislate 2.5 years ago, or just, between 2 and 2.5 years ago, to make it possible for me, the business user, to create contracts in a safe way, in a way that I don't need to get my legal team involved at every single step. And second of all, once the contract's signed, I can easily query my contracts. I can easily share the data in those contracts, both with the systems that I use, whether that's a CRM or whatever other data management system, or even with the other teams. Because what I also found was that post-contract signature, I found myself resending the same PDF to finance, to customer success, and they'd always ask, midterm, what are these terms? When are we supposed to do this? And ultimately, because PDFs, which is kind of the default format of signed contracts, is just not usable. You can't really do anything with it. So that's the long story behind Legislate and what we're solving.
Well, if that's a long story, then listeners are in for a lot more. No, I mean, yeah. I listen, I've felt firsthand the pain of creating and negotiating and doing all things contracts as a non-lawyer, right? Both in a startup and outside. And things are always lawyer readable, right? Things are always dependent on time poor lawyers. And so I see such a need for what you guys are doing. Now there's other tools like this out there, right? So where exactly does this fit into the realm of legal tech that really differentiates you guys?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of other tools out there, most legal tech tools optimize lawyers, which is great if you're a lawyer, but if you're a business user, that doesn't really get you very far unless you have a legal team. If they don't optimize lawyers, they optimize the tools that lawyers work with. So typically Word or PDF, which again is great if you're a lawyer, but if you're actually a business user and you need to create your own contracts, Word or PDF, it gives too much freedom. There's too much room for error or mistakes. And then thirdly, lawyers or Word or PDF, it's all unstructured data. You can't actually track the data in those agreements. So really where we try to position ourselves is around making contracts machine readable. We're making contracts machine readable using knowledge graph technology, which we've patented, and we've actually been granted 2 patents with this approach, which also proves that we're a leader and, quite early in the application of this technology to contracts and documents. And then finally, where we're really trying to, go a step further than all other systems is really, streamlining the end-to-end. So not just the signature, not just the template, it's the end-to-end, so that ultimately we can offer a more robust and transparent experience to both parties when they create contracts. And then finally, because we view contracts as part of a broader workflow than just the actual contract, we really want to connect the data in the contracts to the tools that you interact with, so that you can start to execute what's described in the contract. So a freelancer will need to generate an invoice based on terms which are described in the contract. So we want to be able to generate that, because today most invoices have payment terms which contradict what is agreed in the contract. Why? Because no one's actually read the contract or matched it. So we're automating those connections so that you can, after hiring an employee, set up payroll. When you're a landlord and you're creating a property agreement, you can collect deposits, you can collect rent, all from the contract, because everything starts with a contract.
Mm-hmm. So basically being able to query intelligently everything post-signature that will pull from, whether it's invoices or, phase 2 of the agreement or something in between, right? Being able to query that and automate that to a sense. Terrific.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. So when we look at the key issues with contracts, like, let's just start there, right? Because you're an expert in this space now that you've built the company for non-lawyers to be able to, leverage these types of tools as part of, really getting business done. What are the key issues that you see with contracts and how to avoid them?
So I think one of the first key issues is just understanding. So if you are not used to creating contracts, first of all, you don't know what you're looking out for. And second of all, you might be tempted to give yourself some really favorable terms. So that's if you're a little bit more educated and you, understand what's favorable or what sounds good to you. But the problem with that is it doesn't really provide, robust foundations for negotiation, and you'll always end up in the middle. So I think, when there isn't that clear understanding, or a genuine belief in fair terms, and I think that's when you start to get issues with contracts. But I'd say the other key issue with contracts is the language and the readability. So again, it kind of goes back to the understanding. So if you adopt language which is hard to understand, then it doesn't create trust, because why are you using complicated language for something which really should just be simple? And if you factor in a lack of understanding, then ultimately you end up in a situation where it's the unknown. But again, going back to what Legislate does, all the contracts on Legislate are good. They're lawyer approved, they're fair, they're robust, they're transparent. So I think despite solving this problem with contracts, the only real problem that we face now is more when our users, maybe they don't understand enough about contracts, and they might request changes to the actual agreement, which we will say, no, you can't, because either it's not fair, it's not reasonable, or it's just not legal.
What's that like working? I mean, a technical solution for non-lawyers to teach some of these things and educate on some of these things, I can imagine is there's a heavy services element to that as well. Is that something that, tell me about the interactions with your ideal client profile and how you've kind of gotten to that point?
So first of all, we provide a lot of content on our website, and that's actually how we source most of our prospects. Content which explains, which contracts to use for the specific situation, or once you've kind of worked out, which contract is relevant for you, then what needs to be in your contract, or, what are the risks of not using any old contract using any old contract, etc. So we provide all that content, and usually when a customer or a prospect kind of signs up, they've already been through that journey. When they're on the platform itself, we allow users to create contracts by answering questions, which again are relatively simple. They have their own, help boxes where clients can kind of read and understand what this question about. But generally speaking, just by presenting a contract in the form of a set of questions and answers, that provides some level of education, because we're only really asking questions about the key terms. And at the end of the day, the key terms are what matter to the business user. So that's kind of how we overcome that education barrier. And then, only if, the client's gone through that process, the contract's been generated, and they actually read the contract, they sometimes have questions, and we address them by, we've got this toggle which will explain, the clauses. But if even that doesn't help, then, we might, have a call with them. But that's usually quite rare. And I also think that because we've been, working quite closely with our clients, we're also, understanding what are their common questions and how can we kind of preempt them. And also what are the market standard terms, because we source our contracts from, the gold standard libraries that all the law firms, get their contracts from. Mm-hmm. But those libraries and templates, they will include everything, every possible clause and situation, relevant to that contract. Whereas when you speak to clients and you understand what is market standard, then you end up, effectively removing a lot of unnecessary items, which actually might have, created some negotiation. So I'd say because we've now been tried and tested by real users, real customers, and it is collaborative initially, it becomes, less collaborative down the road.
Sure. That's great. You're a solo founder, right? And we've had a lot of guests talk about partnership and co-founders on the dirt, but you've started a company, right? Your first one, and you've been in other startups in the past as well. What do you see as kind of the core benefits and challenges of going at this alone as a solo founder?
So first of all, I'm a solo founder because I couldn't find a co-founder, and I didn't want to just hang around. I almost had a co-founder, and he was about to resign, and then his employer made a counter offer, and he just didn't quite have the guts to turn that offer down. Mm-hmm. And I think there are definitely challenges of being a solo founder, but I feel like those challenges, I felt them more in the first months of the company, where I really was by myself. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot harder to hire, because when you're by yourself, then potential employees might be wondering, well, why are you by yourself? Why don't you have a co-founder? And when I started the company, I only had 3 years of professional experience, so I didn't have a huge track record either to say, I worked at Goldman Sachs, this is why you should work for me, type of thing. So it was definitely harder at the beginning to attract people, but I'd say the key benefit is there's no such thing as co-founder disputes, because at the end of the day, I can make decisions quite quickly, but obviously you don't want to make decisions quite quickly and go down a rabbit hole that you can't pull yourself out of. And I feel like that's something that I counterbalance by engaging the team and being challenged by the team around, okay, what is the right decision? Sure.
Are there any stories you can share of when you just wish, damn, I wish I had a co-founder, or the opposite, wow, I'm really glad I'm a solo founder?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wished I had a co-founder in the very early days when we didn't have much funding, because founders work for free effectively, and I just thought it would be great to have one more person working as hard as me. We'd be able to go twice as fast, and maybe it would have made everything easier. I also wished I had a co-founder when in the early days, for example, I hired a CTO and he quit after a week. So, then that would have been a lot better if I had a co-founder. Yeah. But it is what it is, and you just need to move on.
I'm going to tie a couple of things you said earlier to that. So you mentioned that there's been this repository of content that you guys have created to help not only educate, but also, drive new business your way, right? Would that be fair to assume, largely growing the company through SEO then within that content? Okay.
So, yeah.
And did you grow up, with your skill set, was marketing in one of the top ones, or were there some lessons learned in not having a co-founder and realizing the power of what SEO can do for you?
So I'm not a marketer, and I guess pretty much everything, for me at least, is self-taught. When I was first exposed to content marketing when I was working at the previous startup, and it was more because I felt that a topic like machine learning 6 years ago was, a lot less known. Now you talk about machine learning, pretty much everyone has heard of it or understands what it is about. But 6 years ago, it was a completely different story. There was a lot of, needing to explain what machine learning is before you could even talk about the benefits. Yeah. And because we were also quite a deep tech research heavy company, we were kind of, going deeper than just, what is machine learning? It was more things like, what is Bayesian optimization? And I found that if I could write about those topics, I could teach myself about those topics, because to write about it, you need to understand it. And then second of all, once those topics were written and covered, then it would help our clients, but prior to the meeting, or at least it would give them material that they could forward internally, or even it would actually attract, readers. And actually we were posting articles on Medium, and very quickly we got over 20,000 views for, a couple of pieces of content. And I thought, actually, there is potential here. So that was part of my business development strategy at Mind Foundry, the company, to just produce content. And when I started Legislate, I thought, well, it's not too dissimilar. Contracts are, a pretty complicated topic, even for lawyers. Why don't we, just start writing? And I didn't necessarily think SEO at the time would be our main channel, or that it could be a channel. I just thought it's important for our users and our customers to know what they're signing and what they can create, and why they should choose us versus download a free template online, or whatever. And just started putting out content.
Yeah. And SEO, just for those that might not be aware, search engine optimization, basically organic reach through content, like the folks at Legislate are doing. So any lessons learned or tips you can offer others that are going through, the exercise of how can content marketing or SEO help me?
Yeah, so I think when a founder or anyone says, oh, I don't know how to write, that's an excuse. And I didn't know how to write before. And, whenever we hire people, everyone in the team contributes to the content. So we do all our content in-house, whether you're an engineer or legal or sales and marketing person, you need to produce some content. And we've even had, for example, interns who had never written articles before. They hated it at the beginning, and then they just loved it at the end. So I think, the first part is just to force yourself to actually write, because it forces yourself to, first of all, understand truly what it is you're doing, or the topic that you're writing about. And then second of all, it forces you to explain it in simple enough terms to convince someone that I know what I'm talking about, and therefore I can educate them, and they'll feel like they've learned something from this. So I think, that's kind of the key thing, because there are lots of founders that I meet or whatever that, oh no, I don't have time, or I don't know how to write. And I think, you can always find time, and everyone can write. And if you can't, then you just need to view it as a self-improvement, skill, and just work on that. But then I think in terms of, how to kind of align your content to SEO, it's a combination of factors. And I wouldn't call myself a SEO expert, but I feel like my engineering mindset has helped me understand, what is it that search engines are looking for. And if you think about search engines, and if you take a step back, their client ultimately are the people searching online. So if you can give them what they're looking for, then search engines will reward you. And if you take a step back and think, well, what is it that a searcher would like to find on my website? And, in our case, Legislate, that's contracts, then we really need to think about what would a searcher want to find. And there are many types of searchers that are looking for contracts or legal related documents, or, you can go a lot deeper. You can say, well, customers who are searching for contracts, they also have employees, therefore they're also interested in HR topics. And so if you can, cover the full end to end of, who are the different people searching in my space and what are the different levels of content they're interested in. It might be guides, it might be, explainers, it might be how-tos, it might be, just something to download. As long as you cover the end to end of different levels of commercial intent, different personas, and then start to kind of really build content hubs, then you can build authority, and then, all of a sudden start to rank, not because you've optimized for SEO, but because you've optimized for your readers, who are ultimately going to be hopefully your customers.
Well said. Yeah, well said. Any times that you did something different than that you learned from in the process?
So we've definitely had a lot of fun with SEO, because there are all sorts of tools that tell you. I mean, Search Console is still the best tool in my opinion, which is Google's product, which you link to your website, and it will tell you all the queries that customers use to find you, or even appear in their impressions. And sometimes we found really random things like slugs in the house. And we thought, why not just create a page about slugs in the house and see what happens? So we've got various pages where we're number one for really random terms, but they're more, vanity metrics. And I don't think they're actually contributing to our, SEO success. So I think, those are rabbit holes that we went down. And sometimes, you might try to optimize for traffic, but, so going after a really, high volume keyword, like a login page, for example, of a certain company, or but even if you rank well, the traffic that you get doesn't actually do anything. So
yeah,
and that's examples when we've deviated from the core, and I'd say it was more fun, but again, you shouldn't really be doing that.
Yeah, so not all traffic is good traffic.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, a lot of vanity metrics in quantity rather than quality to learn from there.
Yeah.
When you think back to your favorite moment in getting to today at Legislate, are there any that come up as just, man, like that was a good time? Anything that you can share that might be helpful for others listening in?
I mean, I feel like when we secured our first round of institutional funding, because prior to that, there was a lot of needing to prove myself, prove the company, prove the vision. And I feel like, at the time also, we barely had a product, because I was coding, had a couple of consultants helping out. And whenever I'd explain, why are we using knowledge graphs, it would always be, well, why are you using knowledge graphs? It's a waste of energy, time. And or they'd be like, oh, I'll just DocuSign, or why not just use a template? And it was a real, really frustrating. It felt that I was constantly hitting a wall. And then when we did secure that funding, it allowed us to build a team. It provided some credibility, less credibility than I thought, but it provided some credibility with who we were speaking with, or with clients. But ultimately, because we had a team of now 12, and we're able to build a real product, get some real content on the website, and just progress in our vision. Not only that itself did it give us some credibility, but it also then helped me understand how to better talk about the company. It helped us get more client interactions, therefore understand what was special about what we were doing. And I feel like even today, I'm still learning about, what is it that we're building. Obviously, there's a vision, there's a roadmap, but you only really, learn as you go. And I feel like that round of funding was kind of a key moment for getting to where we are.
Yeah. Any roadblocks or obstacles that were in the way during that funding venture, if you will?
So I only gave 2 pitches because I also recognized that based on the state of the company and the fact that I was a solo founder, and without much professional experience, I could only really go to the investors of the previous company. And one said yes, the other said no, and hopefully the other regrets. But yeah, I think if we do another round of funding, then it'll be a different story, and then I'll have to learn how to do that.
But there's a good underlying tip there for folks, which is don't just go out and focus on quantity on the investment side either, right? Be strategic about who you want to talk to and why, and the message to them, and the narrative. And while those results can't always be duplicated, where you talk to 2 to get 1 to invest, certainly can streamline the process as much as possible. So
yeah,
still some good lesson in there. All right, so we've gotten to this point, with the company, and you guys are off running, you've got funding, but obviously there's still things that keep you up at night. So what are those things that still keep you up at night?
Well, I think as a startup that now has 12 employees, the next phase of the company is going to be around growing a bit more aggressively, doubling headcount, and expanding into new geographies. And I feel like we can do it, and that's where we need to go as a business. But we need to prove to our next round of investors that we can actually do that, or that we're the right company and that this is the right vision. So I think, whilst I do think we're in a good position, and all the stars are aligning, until they've aligned and that's done, it's definitely at the top of my mind.
Well, best of luck to you, and hopefully there's some folks listening in that are perking up and think that might be a good opportunity for them to invest in, given the great work that you guys are doing. So on that note, at this part in the show, we do what's called a Founder 5, right? Listeners know that this is really just a series of 5 rapid fire questions. And I'm just going to start throwing a few things your way, and we'll see if we can get through them in around a minute. Does that work for you?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So the first one is the number 1 metric or KPI that you are relentlessly focused on.
Customer growth.
Awesome. Top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
Look up to later stage startups, founders, or just any founder who's been there before.
Nice. Good. On that note, favorite book or podcast or founder who's been there before that's helped you grow?
Founder who's been there before would be the previous, the CEO of the previous company I worked at, who's a great mentor. And then podcast, that would be 20-Minute VC by Harry Stebbings. He interviews lots of VCs and founders, so that's very interesting. And book is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Good one. Awesome. What actor would play you in a movie?
Leonardo DiCaprio, only because I don't know the names of many actors.
Sign that you've been building pretty hard. That's good. What is going to be the title of your autobiography?
If I wanted to be boring, it would be Never Stop Working. But if I want to be a bit less boring, it would maybe be Early Bird.
Maybe it'll be a 2-part series then. There you go.
Maybe.
All right. Well, you've given so much to our listeners, Charles. I always allow for a little bit of self-promotion at the end here. How can those listening help you out?
Yeah. So if anyone wants to create lawyer-approved contracts on no legal budget, and more importantly, track the data in their contracts so that they can automate their compliance or just streamline their workflows, then please visit our website and create contracts with us.
And if, just as we close off here, how can listeners get in touch with you? Is the best way through the website or?
So website, LinkedIn, email, I'm quite responsive.
Perfect. We will put some links in the show notes here as well then. So, all right. Thank you so much for joining On the Dirt, and get back to building.
Thank you, Jim.
All right. Take care, Charles.